If you're wanting to manipulate UVs on your object, you're first going to want to make sure you have a UV projection property applied to your object. UV projection properties live within your clusters, with a sample cluster specifically. They live within sample clusters of your object. So if we select our object to open up the property tree and go down and look at the cluster folder, you can see that there are no clusters here, meaning that we have no UVs on our object. To apply UVs, simply select your object within object mode, go to property, texture projection, and pick your projection. So let's go ahead and just pick a basic projection, and you can see in this case we applied the wrong projection, but a couple things happen. One, if we go within our clusters folder, you can see that we have a samples cluster and a new texture projection property. If we open up this texture projection property, we have our texture definition, which has an input of our texture support. So that means if we move our texture support around, it's going to manipulate our UVs. Now, the texture support itself is a 3D object within the scene. So if we go down here, we can see we have a texture support which is parented to the object that we're UVing. So we can grab this and move it around, and you can see that it's effectively manipulating our UVs. In this case, you can see we definitely picked the wrong side. So if we were to select the texture support and then just hit enter, we get the texture support PPG open, and we can change our projection plane. So we can go ahead and go to XZ, which should be the appropriate projection plane. We can also change our projection methods: cylindrical, spherical. We go all the way down to cubic. The cubic projection is particularly interesting since it has a layout parameter, and it will take the different faces of the cubic projection and lay them out specifically according to each preset. So in this case, if we were to make an object that would make good use of the cubic projection, so I'm just going to grab me a sphere. Let's open it up. Bam. See, there's no projection. We'll go property, texture projection. We'll throw a cubic on here, and by default, the layout that it's using, it's just using this default layout where it's taking each plane and just stacking them on top of each other. So if we were to just grab an island here, texture island, and then just move it, you can see that they're on top of each other. We can change our layout. If we select this, right now Y is going to be on top, so if we select that island, you can see the Y, positive Y is on top. So that's the texture layout section for cubic projections. Your texture support and your texture operator will both disappear once you freeze your object. So if we select our object and hit freeze, you can see both are gone. But if you were to select your object, you can see that the UV projection is still here. So if we go inside your texture editor, you still have the ability to manipulate your UVs. A common problem newer users come across when doing projections with an XSI is the notion of multiple projections. So if I were to select my object and just go to property, let's just do cylindrical, it's going to generate an entirely new texture property. So if I click on this and this, you can see that these are different properties. If you want to manipulate one property over the other within the texture editor, you have a UVs drop down, and you can pick which UV property you're manipulating. So you can see that these are completely different. Now, the problem that comes into play is if you're used to UVing within Maya. The typical workflow is grabbing the faces you're going to want to manipulate or apply apply a projection onto. So if I wanted to manipulate, if I wanted to have a certain type of projection on here within this UV property, I would think I would select the faces and go to property, texture projection, and do whatever projection. In this case, again, it's just going to make an entirely new property. So if I wanted to do something like that, where I want to apply projection onto that selection. I still make my selection in 3D, and then I would just go inside and do a sub projection within the texture editor. So if I were to go under Tools, I can pick my texture projection, sub projection. So I can go ahead and click that, and I get a window that says, hey, how do you want to align your projection? I usually pick best fit. Softimage usually does a great job at that, and I get this texture support, and you can see it's only manipulating those points that are associated with it. So that's the equivalent of selecting faces within Maya and applying a projection onto that.